The machines in the hospital room beeped slowly. Each sound echoed through the quiet room like a ticking clock counting down the final moments of a powerful man's life. Outside the large glass windows of the private hospital in Seoul, rain poured endlessly from the dark sky, streaking down the glass like tears running down a face. The city lights blurred behind the falling rain, turning the skyline into a distant, glowing haze. Inside the room, the atmosphere was heavy with silence. On the hospital bed lay Mr. Chochi, one of the richest and most respected businessmen in South Korea. Wait, before we step deeper into the story, may you like and subscribe to the channel, please. For decades his name had been spoken in boardrooms across Asia with respect and sometimes fear. He had built a global empire of shipping companies, technology firms, luxury hotels, and international trade networks. Powerful men had once waited weeks for a meeting with him, and a single phone call from him could change the direction of billion-dollar deals. But tonight, wealth meant nothing. Power meant nothing. The man who once commanded an empire now struggled to take each breath. His body looked frail against the white hospital sheets. Cancer had slowly consumed him over the past year, stripping away the strength that once made him a giant in the business world. Standing beside the bed were his two daughters. The older daughter stood quietly near the window, trying to hide the tears forming in her eyes as she watched the rain falling outside. But the younger daughter, Shirley, refused to let go of her father's hand. Her fingers trembled as they wrapped around his fragile palm. "Father, please stay with us," she whispered softly. Mr. Chochi's breathing was shallow. Pain filled his tired eyes, but there was something else behind them as well. Urgency. Concern. Fear. Because the man standing across the room was not grieving. He was waiting. Leaning against the wall with folded arms stood Jinx, Mr. Chochi's older brother. He was tall, sharp-faced, and carried an aura of quiet menace. His slicked-back hair and expensive black suit made him look every bit the successful businessman the public believed him to be. But the truth was very different. In the shadows of Seoul's underworld, Jinx was known as one of the most dangerous men in Korea. His influence stretched through illegal gambling rings, underground casinos, smuggling routes, and criminal organizations across Asia. People whispered his name carefully, because those who crossed him often disappeared. And now he stood in the hospital room like a silent predator watching a wounded animal take its final breaths. Jinx finally broke the silence. "You should rest, brother," he said calmly, glancing at the machines beside the bed. "The doctors have done everything they can." Shirley glared at him immediately. She knew that tone. She had heard it before in tense business meetings and private family discussions. Jinx was not here out of love. He was here for something else. Something far more dangerous. Mr. Chochi slowly turned his head toward him. Even in his weakened state, his voice carried a quiet authority. "Jinx, I know why you came." The mafia boss smirked slightly. "I came to see my brother." Mr. Chochi coughed painfully. "No, you came to see what happens to my empire." The room fell silent again as rain tapped steadily against the windows. Jinx pushed himself away from the wall and slowly approached the bed. "Let us not pretend," he said quietly. "You built an empire worth billions. Shipping companies, technology firms, luxury hotels, trade routes stretching across continents." He leaned closer. "And you know your daughters cannot run such an empire alone." Shirley stood up immediately. "My father will recover." But even as she said the words, the heart monitor beside the bed gave a weak, uneven beep. Mr. Chochi closed his eyes briefly, gathering what strength he had left. "I have already made my decision." Jinx's smile faded slightly. "Oh, yes," Mr. Chochi whispered. "I have chosen who will inherit everything." The tension in the room thickened instantly. Jinx's eyes narrowed. And who could possibly be worthy of that responsibility? Mr. Chochi slowly turned his gaze toward the hospital door. The door opened quietly. A young man stepped inside. He was tall, dark-skinned, and carried himself with humble respect. His clothes were simple, and he held a small bag containing medicine and documents. His name was Saka, 25 years old. A young man from Nigeria. And to most people in that room, He was nothing more than the houseboy who worked in Mr. Chachi's mansion. Zhirings stared at him in disbelief before laughing coldly. You brought the servant here? Sokka bowed his head respectfully. The doctor said Mr. Chachi asked for me. Shirley nodded gently. He's been taking care of father these past months. Mr. Chachi struggled to sit up slightly, and Shirley helped support him. Sokka, the old man said softly. Yes, sir? My time is almost finished. Sokka's eyes filled with emotion. Please don't say that. But Mr. Chachi slowly shook his head. I have seen many men in my life. Powerful men. Greedy men. Dangerous men. His tired gaze shifted toward Jinx. And I know exactly what happens when the wrong man controls power. He then looked back at Sokka. So I made my decision. He reached for a folder beside the bed. Inside were the legal documents controlling everything he owned. My empire, my companies, my wealth. He placed the papers into Sokka's trembling hands. They belong to you now. For several seconds no one moved. Shirley gasped softly. Sokka stared down at the documents in shock. Sir, this must be a mistake. But Jinx's reaction was very different. The smile vanished from his face. What did you say? Mr. Chachi looked directly at him. I said the empire belongs to Sokka. You are leaving billions of dollars to a foreign servant? Yes. The answer was calm. Certain. Final. You have lost your mind, Zhirings said. But Mr. Chachi whispered something that would haunt him forever. No. I finally saw the truth. He looked at Sokka one last time. You have something no powerful man in this room possesses. Sokka's voice trembled. What is that, sir? Mr. Chachi smiled faintly. Honor. Moments later the machines began beeping rapidly as doctors rushed into the room. Shirley cried out. But within minutes, the powerful billionaire was gone. The war for his empire had begun. In the days that followed, Sokka's life changed completely. 1 week he had been a quiet house servant inside a wealthy mansion. The next week he was sitting in the chairman's office of Chachi Global Holdings, staring out over the skyline of Seoul from the top floor of a skyscraper. Executives twice his age questioned his authority. Business partners hesitated to work with him. Contracts began disappearing. Shipments were mysteriously delayed. And somewhere in the shadows, Zhirings was watching. One night Sokka noticed a black car following him through the city streets. Another night men tried to force his car off the road in what looked like a carefully planned accident. The message was clear. Zhirings wanted the empire. And he was willing to kill to take it. Shirley realized the truth before Sokka did. You cannot stay in Korea, she told him one night inside the mansion library. If you remain here, my uncle will never stop. Sokka resisted at first. He believed he had a duty to protect the empire Mr. Chachi trusted him with. But the attacks continued. Until one night Shirley placed passports and flight tickets on the table. I already arranged everything, she said. If you stay here you'll die. Sokka stared at the documents. Shirley smiled softly. I'm coming with you. 2 days later, before sunrise, they quietly left the mansion and boarded a flight out of Seoul. As the plane rose above the clouds, Sokka looked down at the city disappearing beneath them. He had arrived in Korea with nothing years earlier. And now he was leaving everything behind again. When the plane landed in Lagos, Nigeria, warm air rushed through the airport and the noise of the city surrounded them. Shirley had never seen anything like it. The busy markets, the music playing in the streets, the energy of people laughing and talking everywhere. At first life was difficult. They had lost the empire. They had lost the power. But they had something more valuable. Freedom. And slowly, something beautiful grew between them. Their friendship deepened into love. One evening as the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in orange and gold, Sokka turned to Shirley. You risked everything for me. Shirley smiled gently. I didn't risk it for you. I chose it. Soon after, they married. Their wedding blended Korean and Nigerian traditions in a joyful celebration filled with music, family, and laughter. Within a few years their home was filled with children as well. First one baby, then another. Their lives became full of noise, happiness, and the simple joys of family. But Sokka never forgot the promise he made to Mr. Chachi. He began building again. Using his knowledge of international trade and Shirley's sharp business mind, they started a small logistics company in Lagos. At first the work was slow and difficult, but Sokka was patient. Year after year the business grew. They expanded into shipping, import and export, and technology partnerships. Soon their company was doing business across Africa. Eventually they even rebuilt connections with partners in Korea. Ironically, the empire Zheng's tried to steal grew larger than before. Except this time it belonged not to one man, but to a family. Years later Sokka stood on the balcony of their office tower overlooking the bright lights of Lagos. Shirley stepped beside him. "You're thinking about Korea again," she said. "Sometimes," he admitted. Shirley looked out across the city. "Your journey started there. But our future is here." Inside the building their children's laughter echoed through the halls. Their companies operated across 2 continents. And the houseboy who once quietly served tea inside a mansion had become a global businessman. Not because he inherited power, but because he earned it. Through courage, through loyalty, through love. And somewhere far away in Seoul, Zheng's eventually heard the news. The young Nigerian servant he once tried to destroy had built something even greater. And this time, it was an empire that could never be taken away. Because it was built not on fear, but on honor. Years passed, and the world slowly forgot the quiet war that had once begun in a hospital room in Seoul. But Sokka never forgot. On a warm evening in Lagos, the sun was slowly sinking beneath the horizon, turning the sky into a sea of gold and deep orange. The city buzzed with life below, headlights streaming along busy roads, ships moving slowly through the harbor where cargo containers stacked high carried the logo of Sokka Global Trade. From the balcony of a tall glass office tower, Sokka stood silently, looking out over the city he now called home. The wind moved gently through the evening air. Behind him, Shirley stepped onto the balcony, holding 2 cups of tea. "You're thinking again," she said with a soft smile. Sokka took the cup and leaned slightly against the railing. "Sometimes I still think about the night your father died." Shirley nodded quietly. She remembered it too clearly. The rain against the hospital window. The beeping machines. Her father's trembling hand placing the future of an empire into the hands of a young man no one believed in. "You kept your promise to him," she said softly. Sokka looked out across the Lagos skyline. "Not alone." Shirley smiled. Inside the office building behind them, the sound of laughter echoed through the hallways. Their children were running through the corridors, chasing each other while the last employees finished their work for the day. Their companies now stretched across continents. Shipping routes connected Lagos, Busan, Singapore, and Dubai. Technology firms in Seoul partnered with their logistics network in Africa. What had once been a dying empire had become something stronger than before. But the most important thing they had built was not the business. It was the life around it. Family. A future. Sokka took a deep breath and looked toward the ocean. "You know," he said, "I used to believe power meant controlling everything." Shirley leaned beside him. "And now?" Sokka smiled quietly. "Now I know power is being able to walk away and still build something greater." Shirley rested her head lightly on his shoulder. Just then, a young voice called from inside the office. "Dad!" Their oldest son ran onto the balcony, slightly out of breath. "There's someone downstairs asking for you." Sokka raised an eyebrow. "At this hour?" The boy nodded. "He said he came from Korea." Shirley and Sokka exchanged a quiet glance. Minutes later, Sokka stepped into the large lobby of the building. A tall man in a dark suit stood near the entrance. He bowed slightly. "Mr. Sokka." "Yes. I bring a message from Seoul." Sokka remained calm. The man handed him a small envelope. Sokka opened it slowly. Inside was a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Crime Lord Zheng's arrested in major international investigation." The article described how authorities across several countries had finally dismantled the criminal network Zheng's had controlled for decades. Illegal casinos, smuggling operations, money laundering, all gone. Zheng's had lost everything. Sokka folded the paper quietly. The messenger bowed again. That is all. Then he left. Sokka stood in the lobby for a moment, looking at the headline. He felt no anger. No satisfaction. Only closure. The past had finally released its grip. He walked back upstairs. Shirley was still standing on the balcony, watching the city lights begin to glow across Lagos. Well, she asked. Sokka handed her the newspaper. She read the headline slowly. Then she looked up. So it's over. Sokka nodded. Yes. Shirley folded the paper and placed it on the small table beside them. Then she smiled. Good. Because the life they had built was no longer tied to the past. Their children laughed nearby. Ships moved through the harbor below. The warm wind carried the sounds of the city into the night. Sokka placed his arm gently around Shirley. Your father once told me something, he said quietly. Shirley looked at him. What did he say? Sokka looked out at the glowing horizon. He said a man's true wealth is not the empire he builds, but the people who stand beside him when everything is taken away. Shirley squeezed his hand. And now? Sokka smiled softly. Now I finally understand what he meant. The camera of life seemed to pull slowly back from the balcony. From the tower. From the city of Lagos glowing beneath the night sky. Far away across the ocean, the city of Seoul stood under its own quiet lights. Two worlds once connected by betrayal, power, and danger. But in the end, it was not revenge that defined the story. It was resilience. Because sometimes the most powerful man in the world is not the one who keeps the empire, but the one who loses everything, and still finds the courage to build a better one. And that is how the story of Sokka truly ended. Not as a servant, not as a victim, but as a man who turned honor into legacy, and turned love into the greatest empire of all.